Hey, so today I'm coming to you from within Cubase to talk about surround sound. I just love the way it comes out of the bridge here and explodes. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of surround sound albums, a lot of my favorite albums that were released in surround sound. Not only are some modern releases coming out with 5.1 mixes in the deluxe edition packages, but a lot of old classic albums are also being remixed into 5.1 or Atmos. And surround sound is not a new technology. There's been some form of it since the early 1970s, but over the last decade, it's become easier and easier for you to play back at home. Whether that's a home theater setup you have for watching movies, or an actual dedicated multi-channel music system. So you can play back surround sound on anything from very tiny satellite speakers for like your PC, all the way up to gigantic audiophile loudspeakers. In fact, here's my Instagram post from when I bought my surround sound package from Polk Audio. They actually delivered these speakers on a pallet, so that was kind of cool. So given my interest in the surround sound mixes lately, I wanted to try mixing some of my own music in surround sound, and that's part of what I want to share with you today. I'll start this off with a brief note/disclaimer. You will only be hearing stereo sound watching this video. YouTube, as of today, does not allow any surround sound audio to be uploaded. I know there's a lot of like 8D audio video that claims to have surround sound music or sounds, but those are all faked using EQ and panning techniques. It's still a stereo upload. That's all YouTube allows. However, if you would like to hear what we're going to be mixing today, the true 5.1 discrete surround sound mix, I've included a free download link in the description where you can grab the file and listen to it if you are set up for surround sound. So before we get into any of the mixing, I think we need to do a little bit of like history of surround sound. So with sound recording technology, everything started as mono. You had one channel, all the sounds were in that one channel. So the only way you could really create any depth or space in a mono signal is going to be with reverb, EQ, and volume. That's all the engineers had to work with. The more reverb you add to something, the further away it's going to sound. Also with EQ, the higher frequencies are going to sound closer to you, and the lower frequencies are going to sound further away from you or muffled, like they're in another room. And then of course volume. Anything that's loud is going to sound close versus something that's quiet, which is going to sound distant. So stereo was first invented in the 1930s as far as what we think of as stereo, but didn't really become popular until the 60s. That's when you start seeing a lot of albums released in both mono mixes and stereo mixes. And now with stereo, you could create a lot of space and a lot of depth in the mix. Again, a lot of that was done with reverb, a lot of that was done with EQ, a lot of that was done with volume, but now you could also have panning. So you could put a guitar just in the left speaker or the drums just in the right speaker, and that's how some of the early stereo mixes were made to kind of show off the format. It's not enjoyable to listen for very long like that, but I could imagine how cool that would be after listening to everything through one channel to finally hear some separation in that. And as soon as stereo started becoming popular, quadraphonic sound was invented in the 70s. Quadraphonic has 4 channels, so you have a left, a right, and then a surround left and a surround right. Quadraphonic sound was released both on reel-to-reel tape and even vinyl, but to play the vinyl back you needed a special decoder, and not a lot of people wanted to invest in this, so the format never really took off. Despite that, there were a couple hundred albums mixed in quadraphonic format. And today you can hear a lot of those as they've been re-released on DVD or Blu-ray when they have archival reissues of albums. Then in the 1990s, you get what we typically think of as surround sound today, modern surround sound, which is 5.1. This allows for 5 speakers and 1 subwoofer. So you have left channel, center channel, right channel, left surround, right surround, that's your 5, and then a subwoofer, which is your 0.1. Although modern 5.1 was invented and used in the 90s for the first time, there was actually a 5.0, so no subwoofer channel, film released in 1975. So The Who's Tommy, it's a rock opera. It was made into a movie. The soundtrack for that was actually recorded in quintaphonic sound, which was 5 channels instead of 4, and kind of was an early pioneer of 5.1 sound. But again, there really wasn't any way to hear this at home until DVD players and small theater in a box kind of setups became popular. So that's when you saw the introduction of Super Audio CDs and DVD audio. Both of these disc formats allowed for stereo and surround sound mixes to be included on the same disc. At this time, we saw another rush of mixes come out from the record labels, the same way we did when quadraphonic was invented in the 70s. And again, you needed special players with special decoders, especially for Super Audio CDs. DVD audio tended to also be backwards compatible with DVD video players, but not always. And if they were played back in a DVD video player, the quality was lower than what it would be in a dedicated DVD audio player. So again, we didn't see the adaptation that we needed, and these mixes and these releases started trailing off pretty quickly. You still get dedicated 5.1 mixes on almost every film that's released, so Blu-rays and DVDs, they all have them, but you didn't see a lot of music and album releases in 5.1 until the last about 5 years. Now a lot of these super deluxe editions that come out include Blu-rays or DVDs that have 5.1 mixes, and some are even getting Atmos mixes. So Atmos works differently from traditional mixing. In a traditional mix, you have your dedicated channels, whether that's one channel for mono, left and right, 2 channel for stereo, quadraphonic, 5.1, whatever it is, the mixing engineer can say, okay, this sound should be in the center speaker only, or this sound should be 80% left and 20% right. Atmos, however, works with objects instead of speakers. So each audio element is an object. It could be the snare drum is an object, the rhythm guitar is an object. And then the engineer can move these objects around in the sound space however they'd like. And instead of printing the actual number of speakers, you just give this object the data of where it should be at any given point. An Atmos receiver then decodes this data and uses however many speakers you have, whether it's 2 or 27, to fill with the sound of that object. It's actually a really cool and forward-looking technology. It's almost similar to something like they would use in a video game where as the player is moving about in the scene, the audio objects need to follow that player so that if I spin around really quick and I'm in first-person mode, the sound should also spin around my head. So the first Atmos mix was installed in a theater in 2012, but it wasn't used for a dedicated audio album until 2017 when REM's Automatic for the People came out. That was the very first Atmos release for an album. Since then, you've had dedicated Atmos mixes from NXS and Steven Wilson, The Beatles, and hopefully we get a lot more soon. Atmos is also backwards compatible, so if you only have a 5.1 system or a 7.1 system, you'll still get all the sounds. The one thing that Atmos added in addition to the normal 5.1 or 7.1 or however many speakers you have at ear level were height speakers. So this time sounds could move not only around you on the plane that you were on, but could also move over your head. So 5.1 means 5 speakers around you with 1 subwoofer. An Atmos setup would typically be something like 7.1.4. So there you'd have 7 speakers around you at ear level, 1 subwoofer, and then the 0.4 would be your height speakers. So you'd have 4 speakers above you on the ceiling. Obviously you can see the advantage of this for films when you have helicopters flying overhead or whatever. But in the audio realm, you can get the voice of God coming down from the sky. You can have guitar solos flying all over the room. Again, just a really cool technology. We're not going to be playing with that today, though. Today, we're going to be playing with 5.1 because that's all I'm set up for, and that is the most popular surround sound format currently, so it's what most of you, if you are set up for surround at all, will be set up for. So on the screen here, we have my first solo single. This is called Fault Lines. I released this in September of 2019, so there is a stereo version out there that you can go and listen to on my YouTube channel. I have a lyric video up. You can buy it on Bandcamp or stream it on Spotify. There are many ways to listen to the stereo version. But today I'm going to be showing you the mix I made in 5.1. And again, this will be available for free as a download in the description, so you can listen to it on your own surround sound system. Because again, what you're hearing here on YouTube is just going to be a stereo fold down. There's no way for me to upload a surround sound file. So before we dive too deep into this, I should explain how visually we could do the surround sound panning. When you're working with a stereo project, you can only slide the sound to the left or to the right. And so it's usually indicated by a slider or maybe sometimes a knob. And those elements are there to only show you how far to the left or the right the sound is panned. But in surround sound, we need a different kind of panner. And so we get this really cool bird's eye view of a room. So here are the 5 speakers you're working with. You got your left, center, right, left surround, right surround. And the listener should be dead center of this diagram. That's where they expect the listener to be. And so this track here is an acoustic guitar. It's actually 2 acoustic guitars, one panned hard left, one panned hard right. I can now take that doubled guitar and move them around the room however I'd like. Right now I have them just pulled in from the wall just a little bit to make them sit in the room. So I'll play this for a moment. Okay, so you get an idea what that sounds like. Now, if we wanted to, we can take that sound and pan both guitars over to the left speaker 100% if we wanted. So now it's only coming out of the left speaker. Again, we could take those sounds, move them all over into the right speaker. Of course, then you could start having fun by putting them anywhere in the room. So we could take them and move them all the way to the back of the room if we wanted to sound like the two guitar players are way back there. If we come over to the kick drum here and look at this, you'll see you can also use this knob here to add to the subwoofer channel, the LFE channel. So it's just a dial that allows us to send additional level to the LFE. So it's not taking anything away from the main full range speakers. It's just how much signal do we want to additionally send to the subwoofer. So if we turn on the kick here and I turn the LFE all the way down, you'll see that the subwoofer channel now doesn't have any signal from the kick drum. And then of course, as we dial it back up, you're gonna get signal in there. And if I crank it way up, you know, the kick is gonna be overwhelming. So let's jump back to this acoustic guitar here for a moment. Not only can you take and drag the guitars around the room wherever you'd like them, but let's say I wanted to take the left guitar player and have them in the front of the room and take the right guitar player and have them in the rear of the room. So not only can you click and drag where the spacing should be, but you can also then rotate the signals. So if you see here, my left channel is now going to the front of the room and my right channel is now going to the rear of the room. You can also increase the width of the stereo field, which is again going to send sounds further back into the room. So compared to a stereo slider where you can just go 50% left or 80% right or however you want to do it, this gives you a lot more options to play around with the sound, and you could even automate this and have the sounds swirling around the room if it's appropriate for your song or for your mix. So normally when you play a stereo file, you're only going to have 2 meters over here bouncing up and down. You're going to have a left and right, and you'll be able to meter your levels that way. With surround sound though, we need 6 channels because we need 5 for the speakers that are at ear level and 1 for the subwoofer channel. So I'm gonna go ahead and play a little bit of this. You'll be able to hear it and see the meters bouncing around in 5.1. So this first channel here is the left channel, then you have the right channel, then you have the center, then you have the subwoofer, left surround, and right surround. And so if we stop all these sounds and just kind of focus on one of them, let's say the snare drum, for example, this should mostly be in the center channel, but you're gonna hear some of the reverb in the rear channels. That kind of gives you the sense of space. Again, if I have something like the bass guitar, if we look at the panning here, you'll see it is mostly in the center. That little white dot is where the sound is going to feel like it's coming from. And so you'll see here, the third channel, the center channel, is where most of the volume is coming from. But if we look at some of these other things, like this 80s lead pluck guitar, okay, this is panned all the way to the left rear. So these sounds are going to be coming from behind the listener. Now that's panned just to the left rear speaker, and so I wanted to balance that a little bit with something on the right. So we have this this cool harmonics, the guitar harmonics here, and let me play those. So if we pop up here, we'll see that these are panned hard to the back right. Provides a really nice balance to those two. And again, all these sounds you'd be hearing coming from behind you. And then when you put those in context of the full song, and so if I bring up the full mixer here, you'll see that with my panning selections that nothing is just in the front 2 speakers. Even the things like rhythm guitars and pianos that would normally be in just those front 2 speakers, I've pulled them into the room a little bit. So they're not gonna sound so flat up against the wall. They're gonna sound more like you're in the room with them. Because now if I go to the piano here and solo this out, let me find a section that has some piano in it. Oh, all of it does here. Get a little more active here. Here we go. So you'll see it is coming through in all 5 speakers, but not the subwoofer because there's no super low end of the piano. There was no reason to include it in the LFE channel. But by pulling it into the room a little bit here in the visual panning, it just kind of helps give it a sense of more atmosphere around you. And I took that idea, that concept, and applied it to every instrument. Again, nothing is flat up against the wall except the bass guitar, because I really wanted to plant that in the center speaker. So you'll notice that is flat up against the wall. And when I play that back, it doesn't come through the rear speakers at all. So you have it in the center channel here, you have it left to right, and a bit in the subwoofer channel to get some of that really low rumble, but you're not going to get it in the back speakers at all. With the drums, that was a lot of fun to do the panning on, because most of the time I wanted the drum fundamentals to be in the front. So your kick, your snare, that kind of stuff. Once we got into some of the like cymbal crashes and the floor toms, we could have a little bit more fun with those. So the toms, if we look at those, they're actually way out in like the sides of where you're sitting. So if I'm sitting here, the toms are going to be like right here in the room with me. That's going to give me a bit more impact with them. They're not just going to be so stuffed over there. They're going to feel like I'm sitting, you know, at the drum kit with the toms right beside me. You know, and that's just a great feeling. And then with the overheads in the drums, those, I put the mics in front like you would normally hear them, but we're also able to take the room mics then and put those way in the back to make it sound like you're standing in the room with the drum kit and it's echoing off the walls behind you. So this isn't a fake reverb. This is an actual recording of the room that the drums were in. I just took it and panned it all the way against the back wall. So when we play these, now again, it's very quiet. Probably pump that up a little bit. But that's what your room mics are capturing. And it's just to give it a bit of atmosphere back there to, again, not make the drum sound so flat. So you add the overheads into that, you get a nice little mix. And then once you add in all the drum pieces, you get a nice mix that's kind of surrounding you. And as you can see from the meters, like there's information coming through on every channel. So my producer on this song was Christian Caldera. He's also my bandmate in the Culden Road. He helped me produce this single, and we love to do just stacks and stacks of overdubs. So luckily I had a lot of information to play with here, a lot of multi-tracks. Most of our productions end up being around 100 multi-tracks before we start combining and rendering some of those out. So for example, here we have some background vocals on this track here. And if I play that, you're gonna hear stacks of backing vocals. So normally in the production, this would be, you know, 6, 8, 10 tracks of backing vocals, but we've rendered it into one stereo track to make it a little bit easier to work with. And again, with these, I pan them mostly behind you to make it sound like there's almost like a choir behind you of voices. And that works really well when you have the lead vocal right in front of you. So if I turn the lead vocal on, the blinding hurt of our reality. It's our fault line. You get a nice big ending chorus here with all those backing vocals. It's our fault lines. Beautiful. And so let me just show you some of the other layers we're working with here. Again, the productions that Christian and I usually do are very dense, lots of multi-tracks. So we got this cool lead synth here. And this one's panned to the front right speakers mostly. And this is going to be complemented with this lead harmony guitar. So if I back that up a little bit. And so that's panned to the left front mostly. Then you got this great bass synth that kicks in here. So all these layers kind of build on each other. And again, in the context of the song, you know, each one's a small element. but really makes a difference in just the groove and the way everything feels. There's a lot going on and a lot of little things to hear, which really makes the 5.1 mix a lot of fun to kind of pick these little elements out. Oh yeah, the thunder effects. I almost forgot to mention those. So we have these wonderful thunder effects here. I'll solo them out here and then play them in context. So those are all panned behind you. So the thunder's rolling around back there off in the distance. But it works so well in this song because, you know, the foundations are cracking, things are falling apart. And so in context, this kind of builds up from the bridge. Now in the stereo fold down, this is much louder than it actually is in the 5.1 mix. Unfortunately, I can't show you what the 5.1 mix sounds like. So once I have the mix the way I like it, I then exported a 5.1 wave file out of Cubase here. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so here is just a regular stereo file. So on the top you have the left channel and on the bottom you have the right channel. The blue is showing you how loud the track is, and the orange here is showing you the frequencies that are being played. So you could zoom in here and actually see the bass notes on the bass guitar going up and down. And when he starts singing, you can see, you know, the vocal melodies in these brighter notes. So that's what a stereo file looks like. And when we render it out to 5.1, here's what we get. So again, you have left, right, center, your subwoofer LFE channel, left surround, right surround. And this is the file that you would send in for mastering, or at least the file I sent in for mastering to Marsh Mastering in Hollywood, California. He does a lot of rock mastering and pop mastering. He was actually worked for a while for the Audio Fidelity label doing their audiophile reissues, but he also does a ton of soundtrack work. I mean, name any film you've seen in the last 10 years that you've loved, and there's a good chance he did the soundtrack mastering. So he works with surround sound all the time and was able to mastermind. He wrote back a few notes, said that he loved the amount of separation in the mix without any of like the gimmicks that almost never work. You know, some 5.1 mixes end up very gimmicky where you got the snare bouncing between the back speakers and the front speakers, and no one's going to listen to music that way. It's nice as an effect. Like if you have a delay on one snare hit throughout the song and you bounce that delay between all the different speakers, fabulous. That's going to be a lot of fun to hear. But if your regular snare that's trying to keep the beat is bouncing between speakers throughout the song, probably not a great, enjoyable listening experience. So anyway, I love his mastering work, and I'm really happy that he was excited about this mix because I needed to have someone else listen to it. I needed to see how it translated to another system. When you do your own stereo mixing, you can take it out to your car. You can put it on your big stereo in the living room. You can listen to it on your iPhone. You know, these kind of things. You can get a feel for a stereo mix on multiple devices. But I only have one 5.1 setup, so I can't get a feel for what this sounds like on other devices, other setups. You know, my big fear was that the subwoofer channel might be overloaded. There's actually a bit of a debate on Quadraphonic forums and other surround sound forums on whether the LFE channel, the subwoofer channel, should be used at all for music. If you have 5 full range speakers playing back the audio, that should be all you need. There shouldn't be anything in the LFE channel except maybe a sound effect here and there. So for my mix, I almost went with just the thunder effects in the LFE channel and left all the music out of there. But I know that a lot of people who listen to 5.1 mixes use satellite PC speakers and just have a subwoofer for handling all of the low end. And 99% of the mixes I see coming from professionals include some audio elements, some musical elements in the LFE channel. So usually a kick drum, usually the bass guitar, usually some of the bass synths. And so I've used it that same way. But again, I wanted to see how mine would translate to another system. Same is true for the center speakers. Sometimes systems have smaller center speakers and they do left and right speakers. And so I wasn't sure if my vocals were sitting correctly, if they were too loud, too quiet. So having Marsh Mastering listen to mine on their system, which is much higher end than mine, just made sure that it was going to translate well for when you could decide to listen to it on your system. So that's been my last week. It was a lot of experimenting with 5.1 mixing and seeing what worked and what didn't work, what I thought sounded cool and what just ended up sounding weird or murky. It's been a ton of fun, and in between there working on my own stuff, of course, I'm going to bounce back and listen to other albums in 5.1. And there's a lot of great surround sound content out there. Bjork released her first 7 albums in surround sound in a box set called Surrounded. Depeche Mode has released the first 10 titles, I think, from their discography, all in deluxe editions that included 5.1 mixes. Talking Heads did their entire discography in great sounding 5.1. They really knew what they were doing. Anything Steven Wilson's touched, whether it's the Jethro Tull or King Crimson or his own work or his remixes for the Porcupine Tree catalog, again, they all sound great. And he even joked that he's going to go back and remix everything in Atmos after doing that for his latest album because it's such a cool technology. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed the very brief history of surround sound and a look inside of what mixing a surround sound song is like. If you have the capabilities to play back the song I'm giving away in the description, I hope you enjoy it and maybe leave me a comment, tell me what you thought. If you've done your own surround sound mixes for any music you've released, I'd love to hear it. Please let me know about it. And until next time, thanks for watching.